Anyana timirandasya yananjala shalakaya chakshulun militam yena tasmai shri gurave namah. Jai Gurudev, everybody. So lovely to see you, all these smiling faces. I love it. I'm out in the country in my 3-foot snowdrifts. So it's great seeing all these sunny places. And so as I mentioned, today I'm going to talk about joy because we've had some pretty intense satsangs recently that got into some very heavy subjects. So I wanted to remind everybody that the goal that we're aiming for in all of our sadhana, all of our spiritual practices is joy. And joy is the base level. Joy and love are our basic foundation. And so it's only the things that get piled on that move us away from joy. So that's what we'll get into today, okay, is what we can do to get back to that original, God state that we were born with. And so recently, during Shivaratri, Guruji gave a talk and he said, allowing your mind to focus on the outside world creates restlessness. You are restless because whatever you are doing is not creating great joy inside you. Why? Because your mind is consumed by something else. The desires of the mind are very powerful. Mahamaya is very powerful. So just a reminder, Maya is not reality. Like this reality is all part of Narayana, as are we. Maya is the attachment to it. So there's nothing wrong with being in this reality, having things, going about your life, but being obsessed with it or too attached to it instead of being attached to source, Narayana, that's the problem. And so Mahamaya is like the ultimate delusion, the ultimate confusion that these things are going to bring you joy. And Guruji said a hilarious thing recently. He said, Maya is a Devi and she will beat you with a stick to make you cry for God. So, and it's true. Everything I've chased that was told by me, by society, that it's what I wanted, whether it was marriage, career, stuff, anything I chased, I got beaten with a stick. So it's not a joke. If you are on this path, you actually invite that beating. So I know we like to think that we're inviting in lots of hugs and snuggles, but what you're inviting in is to allow the Guru and God to completely disconnect you from that attachment, because it's that craving for the outside things that is keeping you from joy. So as Guruji said, renouncing outside things does nothing if your mind is still filled with the desire for all the things you've renounced. So, and that's where you see some spiritual lineages go crazy, because they'll force celibacy on people who actually can't stop thinking about sex. So it's not about the action of stopping outward, sex, but like householders who are on the spiritual path, they can make love while constantly staying attached to the divine. Okay, but if you're pretending to be attached to the divine on the outside and yet you're obsessed in your head, then you haven't renounced anything. It's just like renouncing chocolate and then thinking about it all day, every day. So that's the critical click that you have to do. Guruji says, by controlling the senses, you control the mind. Being satisfied in the self, by the self. And that's a very critical phrase to remember. To be satisfied in the self, by the self. And that's what I finally experienced. I renounced everything to take the sannyas vows and go to India, but I still was missing a few critical, I was still hanging on to some things and I didn't realize it. And so when those things finally got ripped away, I started to experience waves of joy and a state that they call causeless bliss. So it seems to contradict what we've been taught. We've been taught that we want to accumulate stuff and experiences and all these other things. And it's the opposite. When you detach your senses from what you think you need outside, like I need to hear a certain kind of music, and I'm talking about music that's not kirtan or bhajans, because singing the name of the Lord is sending you in the right direction. But thinking you need certain things and then I'll be happy. You know, I need to have this smell around me, this, all the senses, right? I need to feel this. I need to see this. I need to hear this. That is what's attaching you to Maya. And when you disconnect those five senses and go in, that's where this profound, profound joy is sitting. And you're just going to have to trust me on that if you haven't experienced it, because I've chased everything that there was. And it wasn't until I was starving to death and I'd lost everything and any ability to connect with the world, any way out. So I literally was sitting on the dirt in India thinking, I'm dying. Like, I guess this is it. And I had resolved the last confusion in the mind that had come up, and I sat there in joy. So it completely confounded me that I had gone the opposite direction of what I was taught to go, and I had found happiness. And when I came back to Canada, one night a drunk friend decided to attack me because she was sure I'd joined a cult. And in my mind, I just, you know, said a little prayer. I was like, oh, please don't make me have this conversation. And the answer I got was, give her this one time. Like, she might have to be drunk to have the courage to have this conversation with you, but don't let her do it to you again. So I jumped in and we had this conversation, and that pleasure center must be destroyed. So that part of your brain that keeps telling you, oh, you should go get this. Oh, you need this. Oh, you'll be happy if you, oh, those shoes. Like, you have to remember that capitalism needs us to consume things. So it's not telling us to buy things for our own good. It's doing it to keep this paradigm rolling. And, you know, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying you try not to be swayed by others' opinions. You have to develop that inner voice that, as Guruji says, in our heart, we've got the Atma, ourselves, and the Paramatma, the ultimate, Narayana. Both are in our heart. And that's the voice that you need to perfect listening to, okay? And because sometimes you do have to buy something, but you'll get that inspiration that, oh, this is a good idea. This is something that will help you on your path, okay? So witness your mind constantly. And this becomes a 24-hour-a-day sadhana, okay? So when your mind drifts into a negative tirade, gossip, judging people, you have to stop it. So picture your mind as a 6-month-old puppy, okay? So when you figure your mind has never been trained your whole life, and then now all of a sudden you're going to put limits on it, it's going to rebel and it's going to fight back. So you have to remember the mind is a tool for you to use, and you can turn it on and off. You don't have to have the mind going all day, every day. So if it starts going, you know, oh, she's dressed kind of ugly today, just stop it, right? Just every time you mentally voice an opinion, oh, well, you know, that wasn't very good, or, you know, what, and, you know, even Swami Revati's talked about times when he's seen Guruji dressed just in a bizarre way, and he's obviously done it to trigger something in Revati, because Revati will go, oh my God, look at him. Like, why has he put that on today? And if anything, Guruji will even dress worse to make him keep reacting. And you have to stop yourself from doing that, to stop judging other people, judging yourself, going into any kind of a negative tirade. And it's easily triggered by your devices, right? Having the TV on, internet news, things that pop up on your phone, they can trigger a tirade by your mind. And when I finally got mine under control, it was in India, and I was alone in a hut, and I had a morning routine that took hours. So my sadhana started at 4:30, yoga, bath, taking care of the Murti on the property, and just, it was this lovely, peaceful morning. And then around 2 PM, my mind would start rummaging through the old files and go, remember when your mom said this to you? That was awful. Like, it was bringing up these archive conversations, and I would slide into this like negativity, melancholy, depression, and it would ruin my day every day. And finally, one day, I witnessed what was happening, and I just threw a temper tantrum to my own mind. And I just said, stop it. Like, you've been doing this to me my whole life. And I realized that's why I had been so melancholy, was I would let my mind wander into these little streams of thought that would depress me. So witness your mind, be really diligent about watching what it's saying to you. And you honestly can just say, stop it, right? You're training a puppy. So just tell it to stop. And it's our training that's done that. I grew up around women who were always nitpicking people, or, they'd be huddled in a corner going, ooh, that haircut of hers is awful. Or, so we've been around a culture where people gossip just to keep themselves busy. So disconnect from that, okay? Our sadhana is what controls the mind. And that's why your mind complains about doing sadhana, because it knows you're trying to shut it up. Okay, so it's a very tricky struggle if, you get jolted awake at 4 AM, which is when we're supposed to do our Atma Kriya yoga, right, for the best results. And if your mind is like, you can go back to sleep, you don't need to do this. It's because the mind knows you're getting it under control. So it will do everything it can to stop you. There is that second voice in your head that is that programmed mind. And as Guruji said, if your sadhana doesn't bring you joy, you're doing it wrong. There are expectations when you do it for the sake of doing it, no expectations. Okay, so whatever, if you're not doing Atma Kriya yoga, if you're just doing japa, you're using your meditation beads, right? And you can just go Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, right? If you're a beginner. And don't have an expectation. Just do it to control your mind and to help you go in. Because when these waves of joy hit, that's what's addicting. When you start experiencing that, you'll know that that's the aim. That's where you're headed. And none of this external stuff that the pleasure center keeps screaming it wants, it cannot do what that joy does, okay? Now in the Bhagavad Gita, which Guruji's asking us all to study, in chapter 3, that's the Karma Yoga chapter, okay? Karma Yoga means doing what's required of you without any attachment to the fruits of your actions. So if you know you're supposed to go to work, don't be obsessed with how much you're being paid. You will be paid enough by the divine if you just do your work honestly, offering it to him, Krishna Arpanamastu, right? If you just do what's expected of you and offer it to the one who created this wild game that we're in, you'll be provided for, okay? And in chapter 3, verses 41 to 43, basically what he's saying is desires are like dust on a mirror. Over time, the mirror can no longer reflect because it's so dusty. And that mirror is your soul, and your desires are what are covering your soul, okay? So as they say, the three gateways to hell are greed, anger, and desires, GAD. So greed, wanting more than you've got, anger at not getting what you want, and desire. So unfulfilled desires create the anger, create the greed. So what you're trying to disconnect is that expecting fruits of your actions. So you just go through your day, and whatever is dropping in, why don't you offer to help your neighbor, finish this work project, do this, do that, do your sadhana. If you do it in a detached state, it's like this form is in the game, and this is what it's being asked to do today in the game. And don't worry about, am I going to get paid enough? How am I going to pay that bill? Because I've been through that and it doesn't work. So when I was a single mom, I knew every penny, where it was coming, where it was going, and it was never enough. And now I don't know how much is in my bank account, but it's always more than enough. And money just keeps coming in as I need it. So when you detach from thinking you're in control of how much money is coming in, and realize that the one that created you is in charge of how much money comes in. And if you don't have enough money one month, then there's a reason for it. Okay, so you go in and you just think, what am I supposed to learn from this? What is going on that there wasn't enough money this month? So it's always a lesson. It's always karma. It's always a lesson. So running around going, the sky's falling, doesn't accomplish anything. We're all in school here, okay? And to remove this dust from the mirror, so the soul is the mirror, and you want to keep it shiny. And so for that to happen, purification has to happen. And we've all either been through it from being around Guruji, or we've heard about it. Recently, Guruji was in India, and apparently most of the pilgrims got sick at one point or another. One young gal broke her foot, which is, in my experience, when you're under the care of a guru, that kind of an accident means the karma for a violent death has been removed from you. Okay, so this purification is ongoing. Like sometimes you might be just walking down the street and get hit in the head, your head bursts open. Just understand that you've probably had a violent death removed from you. So there's a price to pay. All karma has to be paid off. But once you're under the care of a guru, he can remove karma by just giving you a physical injury. Okay? But this purification is really important. And it does make a lot of people run away from the path, because they'll say, I started doing this sadhana and everything's going wrong. This path sucks, which, it's a human reaction. But I witnessed an amazing transformation when I was at the Ujjain Kumbh Mela. And it was 50 above there, clear skies, blazing sun. And that was the forecast for the whole Kumbh Mela. And out of nowhere, this violent storm hit, and it ripped the roofs off all the temporary structures. Like there was tornadoes ripping through most of the big camps. It was hell on earth. Everything flooded. We had the place I was staying, there was 5,000 of us. All the big dorm tents flooded. All the bedding got wet. 5,000 people, the bathrooms broke. And in the middle of it all, this one young girl from Montreal went running past me, and she was lit up like a light bulb. And she was like, I've got this. I know what to do. And it turned out she was a circus performer, like not Cirque du Soleil, but an acrobatic circus performer. And they were always traveling around the world, setting up their tents, doing their performances, taking the tents down and moving. And the whole time I had talked to her previously, she didn't know why she was there. She was thinking, I don't know why I came to this Kumbh Mela. This doesn't feel right. This isn't for me. And I just kept saying, just wait for it. Like something inspired you to come. So just hang on a minute. Like you don't just show up in India and then leave. That's a waste of a trip. So she hung in. And then when this storm hit, she just launched, and she was running around organizing teams, getting people, okay, you're in charge of, getting the water under control, get the tents back up. She was unbelievable. And when it was all said and done, we were sitting and talking one night, and she said, this was the biggest turning point in my life, because she said, I've always been waiting for people to hire me. And I realized that I'm management. I know how to do this. She said, I'm going to start my own company, and I'm going to hire all my friends, and we're going to put on our own shows. And I thought, what a revelation. So the purification that happened to her in that catastrophic storm, it cleared her mirror, right? All the dust that she had on it of, you're not good enough, you have to wait for people to hire you. Whatever she had been convinced of was purified during that storm. And that is this path, that you have to expect things to happen that will flush you out, like, vomiting, diarrhea, or just be like a catastrophic event that you have to rise to the occasion. And all of it is cleaning that mirror off. Okay. Stop being afraid of purification. And it's easy to be afraid of it. Like some of you might have heard my story about the Nasik Kumbh Mela. So the first one I went to was where I was initiated as a sannyas, and I was just violently ill. Like, it was coming out of everywhere, and I was just curled up in the fetal position, and everyone else is partying and running out the door, to go to the river, and I was a mess. And at one point in the middle of the night, everyone had left, and I could feel this rumbling happening. So I ran to the bathroom tent, and I had a stern conversation with God, and I said, come on, like, you got to cut me a break here. And I blacked out. And when I came to, I was upside down behind the toilet, facing the wall. So I must have arched up off the toilet, come down behind it, upside down. And so when I came to, I'm trying to figure out where I was. And then I realized I was upside down. And then I realized the toilet was behind me and I was facing the wall. And I was just like, oh, come on. This isn't funny anymore. And I literally heard laughing in my head, and I slid sideways into the garbage cans to crawl out from behind the toilet. But something snapped, right? Like, something shifted so dramatically because of that. And everything became very funny, right? The whole rest of the experience just got funnier and funnier. So whatever was in me that was stopping me needed that smack, right? Needed something so bizarre to happen that I would shift the context that I was looking at the world. Okay. And that's what purification does, is it helps you let go of your rigid expectations, because you can't experience joy as long as it's qualified, as long as it's, well, I'll experience joy if this and this and this and this are right. Okay. It doesn't work that way. So there is a terror often associated with transformation. Let go of that. Okay. Welcome it. If something bizarre enters your life, just go, all right, and have nonstop conversations with God and Guru. Just say, all right, let's go. The game's on. Let me know what you want me to do. And recently in Mauritius, Guruji did a virtual pilgrimage there. And as you know, Cyclone Freddy hit. So talk about purification. The biggest cyclone in history hit the island and was circling that area for a month. They said they've never seen a cyclone last that long. And so I'm sure a lot of fear was triggered in the participants who were in Mauritius with him. But what happened was, instead of them going out and visiting places, they went into lockdown in the hotel with Guruji all day for 1 or 2 days. And it was heaven on earth, right? So in the middle of this supposedly catastrophic situation, people experienced joy. And Guruji's explanation was, make paradise here first, then you will go to Vaikuntha. Make this your heaven, and Bhagavan will reveal himself to you. So there's a couple of things you can start doing now to allow that perception to happen. So stop feeding your mind a constant flow of world news. It creates profound depression and feeling of helplessness, right? Because you cannot change what's going on in the world. And we are in what's called the Kali Yuga. So it's the darkest age, the age of hypocrisy. And so the nature of the game is that the leaders are going to be demonic. There's going to be hypocritical things going on everywhere. But the point is for you to rise above that. You can create Satya Yuga in your sphere of influence now. Okay, so don't just buy into what the news is telling you, what anything's telling you. Keep focused on God and Guru. Keep doing your spiritual practice, whatever it is, and disconnect, turn off your technology as often as you can. All right. Avoid gossip, avoid getting into those conversations that don't go anywhere. And something that Neja and I were just talking about recently is to have a bath at night. Okay. And this was something that was told to me decades ago by some psychics I knew, because they said they could see me covered in like a black tar at the end of the day. I worked in a metaphysical bookstore with them, and they could see me taking on people's stuff. And they said, you need to have a bath at night so that you can sleep peacefully. You need to bathe all that stuff off you at the end of the day. So they said it was more important than showering in the morning. It was better to, at the end of the day of going through the day and being out in the world, to bathe at night to get everybody else's negativity off of you. So if you're having trouble sleeping at night, try that, okay? And then there's an ancient Chinese saying, if the troubles of the world get you down, chop wood, carry water. And there's really something to that. Physical exercise helps shift your mind. People get very neurotic when they're just in their head all the time, if they're not doing any physical activity. So do yoga, go for a walk, do something physical, because this body has to be maintained in order for you to evolve. This is a temple, and Guruji says, take care of it like a temple, okay? So keep doing physical activity, clean your neighbor's house if you don't, get tired doing your own house. And then the biggest one, in my opinion, is don't let anyone shut you down, okay? Make sure you aren't forced into things that you don't want to do. Okay, freedom brings joy. And I remember when I've been married twice, and my first marriage was to an oil executive, and there was a lot of money involved. And I decided that I couldn't fight. He wanted to fight over everything. And I ended up just walking away. I put my guitar and my typewriter in my car, and I drove to California. And I refused to fight over the money. I thought, you want it that bad, choke on it. And he did. He went bankrupt the next year. There's a saying, revenge is mine, says the Lord. And interestingly, 20 years later, I ended up being in the same city he was in just for a conference. And he got a hold of me and he said, I know I have no right to ask this, but he says, you have nothing and you have everything. I have everything and I have nothing. He said, would you talk to me? And I thought, isn't that something? And so we got together for lunch, and it was amazing. And, they talk about closure, to never leave something dangling, because then you've created karma for it to be repeated again. And we had this great conversation where he was completely humbled over watching my decisions in life and seeing me get happier and happier. And he just accumulated more and more stuff and was more and more miserable. So if you don't believe joy comes from renouncing stuff, just scan the world, just check around, and you'll see it a lot in people who have a lot of wealth, a lot of money. It's like they're bitter and their mouth is turned down, and there's this anger. And I think it's anger at life because they thought stuff would make them happy and it hasn't. And I think that's what the anger and resentment is. It's like, I played by the rules, how come I'm not happy? Right? Well, the rules of Maya and the rules of the divine are polar opposite. So be very careful when you feel yourself getting sucked into the other end, right? Where there's or if you've got stuff, to just acknowledge that it's being given to you by the divine and just be grateful. You know, thanks so much for giving me a great safe place and a great safe place and, you know, all the things I need, and just acknowledge where it's come from. Okay. Because when you don't acknowledge where it's come from, it will get ripped away. Okay. So, so one of my favorite sayings came from the homeless on Venice Beach. So after I left my oil executive husband, some of you have read my memoir, Inside the Wall, I went and lived with the homeless on Venice Beach. And it was profound joy because nobody knew what I did, what my name was. We all went by nicknames. And every day was just electric because you never knew what was going to happen. And they used to say to me, God feeds the birds, he'll feed us too. And sure enough, I had food every day. But one of their sayings really stuck with me. Because when they saw a guy, gathering crabs on the beach, digging up crabs and putting them in a bucket. And I said, doesn't he need to put a lid on the bucket? And they said, you don't need to put a lid on a bucket of crabs, because when one crab looks like it's almost getting out, the crabs below will pull it down in their attempt to get out. And I thought, that's what people do. If it looks like someone's escaping Maya, if someone's clawing their way towards freedom, the people who are still stuck in it will try and pull them down, right? And usually it's our family. That they can't believe that you have made a choice to escape that prison, to escape that rat race, and they will try and pull you down, just like crabs in a bucket, right? So the wisdom of those homies was pretty profound. Their other saying they taught me, that it was like my first mantra, 1988, before I found Paramahamsa's, was free your mind, your ass will follow. So you can make a note of that one too. So one of the terms that Guruji has been speaking about is Sharanagati. Okay, Sharanagati means surrender. And this is more along the lines of karma yoga. It's about doing what you're expected to do, but don't be attached to the fruits of your actions. Okay, so surrender means you acknowledge you've got a boss. You've got a boss who is divine and created you, and you will do whatever you're asked to do, but with that idea of surrender. And as Guruji said, when he sees that single-pointed focus on him, meaning Narayana, he knows he will become the slave of that bhakta. So our desire is what makes God a slave of us, which I know it's a pretty humbling thing to think about. But he has to be sure before giving himself. He has to be sure that that bhakta is clear, absolutely. That's why when you look at the lives of saints, he puts them through trials, through so many severe trials. And it's to see if he can shake you loose. And you see it happen all the time within Bhakti Marga. People will get swept up in the joy and the happiness and everything. But then as soon as Guruji tells them to do something that conflicts with their ego, their mindset, they'll run away. And all he's doing is shaking you to see if he can make you run. Okay. And I've been through humiliating, almost abusive situations when I was in India. It's like, I've never seen Guruji do the level that the Shaivites do. So no matter how mean you think Guruji can get, it's nothing compared to the traditional hardcore Orthodox Hindus. But the reason they're doing it is to see if you are sincere or if you have a plan B. Like if the slightest little disturbance will make you run and go join some, flaky adventure that never challenges you, then God cannot be attracted to you as a bhakta, right? You have to show that you will stick it out no matter what, that you can't be shaken. Shaken, not stirred. Isn't that what Bond says? So recently in Vrindavan, Guruji said, the limited senses are all running to the outside. They cannot find the one who is unlimited. So your mind and your senses are limited. They cannot comprehend the unlimited. So don't expect your mind to give you a solution for why you should be following this path, okay? You have to go into your heart. Once you've met Krishna, Narayana, inside your heart, you will see him everywhere. You must be responsible for this to happen. It's hard to be responsible, but most want easy things. You will not find him by doing easy things. It just complicates your life. Okay, so step up and be strong. You are responsible enough to be on this path, and you are resilient enough to handle anything that gets thrown at you, okay? Be very careful that you don't fall into victim mode, don't go into a poor me thing, right? Everything that's happening is happening for a reason, and it's to give you strength. And so for those of us who are studying the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 5, the Karma Sannyasa Yoga, which is true renunciation. So verse 22 says, the pleasures that arise from contact with the external world are the source of suffering. They have a beginning and an end, O Arjuna, and so the wise do not rejoice in them. Okay, so you understand what it's saying, that anything that you desire, it'll be okay for a minute and then it's not. Okay, and so that's people. People will always let you down. I've let people down because I don't know what they're expecting from me, so I can't deliver what they're expecting from me. So you are letting people down without even knowing it. You've probably had other people let you down. And so what the shift I've done is I don't expect anything from anybody. And as a result, I'm pleasantly surprised all the time. Okay. So by not expecting people to say the right thing, do the right thing, treat you a certain way, if you just are happy in the self by the self, then nothing people do to you is going to disrupt your day. Okay, so that's a very important stance to take. So that's chapter 5, verse 22. And then same chapter, verse 29. And knowing me as the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, as the Lord of all worlds and the friend of every being, one attains peace. Okay, so this is the friend who will bring you peace. Okay, and expecting to get it anywhere else is going to create suffering for you. Okay, so you have to get that mindset right now. And in chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, the eternal nature of the soul, when one deliberates, this is verse 62, when one deliberates upon sense objects, attachment to them arises. From attachment comes desire, from desire comes anger. And then verse 63 goes on, from anger arises delusion. From delusion, there's a loss of memory. From loss of memory, the destruction of discrimination occurs. And with the destruction of discrimination, one is lost. So that means that you stop being able to tell right from wrong, good and bad. Okay. So desire is the enemy of peace. And craving outside things is going to put dust on your mirror that's going to allow you having a clear soul is what brings the joy. Okay. And then chapter 271, the one who has abandoned all desires and is free from any craving and does not have any notion of I and mine, that person alone attains real peace. Okay. So my last little story was when I came out of that starving phase and was leaving India, I went to Sri Lanka first, and I went to Katargama, which is where Babaji was trained, and also Buddha was trained. So it's a tiny village at the south end of Sri Lanka. And one night I was at the Lord Murugan temple, and the property also has a Buddhist shrine. And so it's beautiful because the Buddhists and the Hindus regularly just go up and down the promenade visiting each other's temples. And it's spectacular. And the next morning, this elderly Buddhist monk came up to me and he said, I saw you in the temple last night. I was like, yeah. And so we started talking. He said, what brought a Western woman to this path? And I said, I tried everything I was supposed to try and I was miserable. And so I said, ever since I've been a sannyas, I've been happy. And he just looked at me and he said, and now you are free. And it's true. It wasn't until that old man said, you're free. And I thought, I am. I'm on the other side of the world. No one knows what's happened to me. I had stopped posting on social media. So I could have died that instance and no one would have ever known what happened to me. But I was so full of joy and gratitude. And so that's what you're aiming for, is you want that freedom. You want to disconnect your senses. And, for those of you who are my age, you might have remembered there was a show called Laugh-In, and a comedian, Lily Tomlin, used to do a one ringy-dingy, two ringy-dingy. She was a telephone operator and she used to plug in like an old switchboard. If someone was calling, she'd have to plug in. And when I was meditating one day, I thought, these are the senses. If we unplug those senses from this board that is Maya, that's when you go in, right? That's when you experience the true self. You have a one-to-one relationship with the Paramatma, who I've spoken to on a couple of occasions when I've been pulled out of my body. And when I came back, I realized that was in me all the time. I didn't have to leave and come back to understand that's all. The voice in there has always been there. So start having conversations every day. This is your best friend. Get up in the morning and go, well, what are we going to do today? Or, sometimes I'll come through some unbelievable, intense situation and that voice will go, well, that was fun, wasn't it? and I'll sort of go, yeah, it was. When you step back and stop judging situations, you realize that you are that adventure film that you want to watch, right? Whatever movie you wish you could see, on the big screen, let it become your life. Allow the adventures and the craziness and the shaking, because you realize how alive you are, and you realize that the divine is sitting inside of you, laughing and cheering you on, right? Every time you throw yourself off a cliff, there's that safety net, right? And then you laugh and you go on to the next adventure. Okay. So that's everything I wanted to say to all of you. Shantis, okay? Om Shanti 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 Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om.
Shri Vitthal Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha. Shri Vitthal Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha. Shri Vithala Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha. Shri Vithala Giridhari Parabrahmane